to speak, and then we will go to a superintendent's recommendation on next steps, and then there'll be an SAU board discussion. So from there, I'll bring Dr. Cascadden up to kick us off.
Thank you. Thank you, Jared. What we're here tonight to discuss is accepting guidance. It's not a change to the plan that we adopted. In fact, if you go on to the plan that we adopted, there was a link to the guidance. So when the guidance changed, the plan was linked to that guidance and it automatically updated. So it's not necessarily a change to the plan, but the guidance change was significant. And we do have an advisory committee. Jenna Reardon and Eric Schulman from the Bow Board are both medical professionals. And then we have the SAU Executive Board, which is Bryce Larrabee, Chair of the Bow Board, Clem Madden, Chair of the Dunbarton Board, and Jared Duncan, Chair of the SAU Board. And then we have another person on the advisory committee is Dr. Noble. And Dr. Noble's a busy man. He's head of infectious disease or epidemiology in Concord Hospital. He gives good expert advice. And I took a phone call with him last night. And before we started tonight, I just wanted to share what his words were from the advisory committee. You know, his first thing is the governor is pretty intense. The governor wants to see schools open and wants to see them open as much as possible. But opening schools at this point is a complicated matter, and it is as much a political decision as it is a scientific decision at this point. And it didn't help, I mean, that teachers were not prioritized in 1B in the vaccination schedule. New Hampshire was one of the few states that did not prioritize their teachers. But I understand the governor's reasoning, but he's very insistent schools can be open right now, and they can be open pretty much full open. The real issue that Dr. Noble sees is transmission, and transmission has been fairly low in school settings. I asked him specifically about 6 feet of distance because that seems to be a point. If we go from yellow to green, the students would definitely drop down to 3 to 6 feet of distance. And I asked him specifically about that guidance. And he's an interesting man. He gave me about a 10-minute explication of how the CDC works and so forth. But he says the 6 feet of distance comes from studies mostly done on the tuberculosis disease, is that 95% of droplets fall to the earth within 6 feet. And COVID, he calls it now COVID SARS-2, but COVID is a disease that is spread by droplets. And that's where the 6 feet of distance come. He says that COVID itself has not really been studied as far as 3 to 6 feet of distance, and that the CDC itself has waffled between the 3 feet and the 6 feet of distance. And he said much more important are masks. Masks are very, very important, and that people don't come to school when they're sick. And that, you know, if you can do those two things, the 6 feet of distance is not as big a protective factor. You know, I asked him what he thought about the governor's guidance, and he said, you know, scientifically, as an epidemiologist, you know, you could go in on February 8th, but he also recognized that this is a political decision and that you need to have support of your community in order to make a change like that. That it would be very difficult to just, well, the scientists say, or, you know, the superintendent says, and you really need to have a discussion. And so that's what happened. You know, we didn't need to have this discussion. We didn't need to have this meeting. In one sense, we could have kept this decision in the advisory committee and possibly with me. I mean, I have been tasked with making a lot of decisions in this change, But you know, it's been a great community conversation. Back to school, Facebook, live conversations, safety committees, staff meetings, strolled through a lot of comments, read a lot of people send them to me, some send them to me directly. And there have been lots of great points made in this discussion. And I think it's been good for us. It's been good for us as a community to talk about this. I think the discussion we had at this time was even richer and better than the discussion we had when we were first looking at the plan. I think there's more reality to it. There's more understanding of some of the difficulties and some of the implementation issues. And it was very respectful. It was very much uplifting for me to read those things. Lots of great points. And really, to summarize it, it's let's get kids into school full time as soon as it is safe to do so. And that part, as soon as it is safe to do so, is the part that's difficult to come to consensus on or deal with in the matter of facts. I'll give you a little bit of my history. I began as a scientist. I began as a biologist, and I believed in scientific truth, and I believed in facts. And then I became an administrator and became a social scientist, and actually went and got my doctorate in educational administration. And my dissertation was on the difference between understanding the world from a scientific viewpoint and understanding it a little bit more from the social science viewpoint, and the role of perception. And, you know, as a scientist, I really believe that you could come to facts, you could come to truth, and through rationality, you could really come to understand the world and make great decisions. And as a social scientist, they introduce a lovely thing. They're called human beings. And I love human beings, and I love to interact with them, and they make the world a great place. But when you introduce them into a situation, perception comes into play. And two people can look at the same set of quote unquote facts and come away with a very different understanding of what they are. And we've seen that recently play out in our politics. We've seen it play out in our history. We've seen it play out in a number of places that different people can look at the exact same thing and come to different conclusions. And the thing in my own life that I came to understand is that people act on their perceptions. How they perceive the world, how they look at it, they act on it. And if they believe something, sometimes it's hard to say that, well, you know, that's not really true, that's not really a fact. It doesn't matter, they're going to act on it, they're going to move forward. And so in my own mind, I had to understand how people view this. I had to understand how our building administrators are dealing with the issues in their building. And I think it's been a good journey, and I do have a recommendation to give at the end of it. But before I give that recommendation, I really ask that our principals share the things that are going on in their building. So Owen, if you're on, Owen, are you on? Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, kick us off. And then when he's done, Lori, you can go right on. And then Adam and Brian's here in the audience. So go ahead, Owen.
Good evening, everyone. So I figured what I would do is just start at where we are right now in yellow and give some percentages. As time has gone on with the epidemic and people's work responsibilities have kind of changed with it, there's been more requests for essential employee status. So in our K-2 classrooms, we're actually up to 75% of our students are in. And our 3-6 classrooms, we're hovering right below 70% at 68%. And some families have decided to stay with the yellow, meaning 2 days in, 3 days out, but the vast majority are here. So we're kind of creeping towards green slowly because of pressures outside of the school. And it's completely understandable on my end. And I think most people in the building get it as well. Some things to keep in mind, though, if and when we do shift to green, is it does change a lot of the practices that we're currently employing, we would have to go to 3 feet of distancing. We're using a lot of individual desks, so we would need to go back to tables and a lot of spaces. And it would change the way that we're delivering instruction in some areas, especially PE. That would have to change because we would need to use the gymnasium again at lunchtime, because at lunch the masks obviously have to come off, and we need to get our 6 feet of distancing in. And for some of the classrooms, that's impossible to do in the classroom with all the students in, so they would have to go down to the gymnasium for lunch. Specifically 4th grade and 2nd grade. A couple other things just to keep in mind. Previously, when we were in green, our school nurse Emily, was sending 10 to 12 students home every week because of sickness, and that's gone down significantly in yellow. So that's just something to keep in mind. It will most likely come back up, and that is a burden on families, because at that point that student needs to be quarantined for 10 days or a negative COVID test and no symptoms. The other major concern that we have is staffing. Just yesterday I was subbing in a 1st grade classroom, and there were 3 other classrooms that needed subs. And if we had one more classroom come up, we would have had to have gone remote in at least one classroom. I don't know if that'll increase in green or not, but that's something that we're dealing with now. And it was a pretty tight week last week as well, with quite a few staff members home with symptoms. So when you take that into account, along with the potential increase in symptoms, it's just something to keep in mind. And I think it needs to be said that it's certainly something that would be easier on families if we went to green, because I can't even give you the number of emails that I've had where just remote learning is hard and remote teaching is hard. Subbing yesterday was really hard, juggling all of that and trying to make it all work. So I think green would alleviate a lot of that, but we just need to make sure that we keep in mind all the other aspects of it. And I don't think I have much else to share. I'm sure Lori will even the rest of it out from the elementary perspective. So thank you.
Just like Owen said, we have a lot of the very similar issues that came up. I'm going to take a moment to also discuss some questions that have come up to myself through individual emails from families, along with comments that came through the Back to School site. And one of those is, when we have people out, how come we're not able to move staff around to cover that? We do that. Since January, we have had roughly, on any given day, up to 10 staff that are not able to be in the building teaching. Sometimes out of that, we have some of those staff who, though, are available to be teaching remotely. As we are an elementary school and the other schools do, we do have to put someone in the room once we have the kids come in to cover that. And that's really been part of the challenge. We have accessed everyone in the building to support that. We, when possible, it will be another paraprofessional. It has also been those teachers who may not be classroom teachers. And sometimes we do this in shifts throughout the day. Could be our reading and math interventionist. It has been Tim Vasconcelos, our assistant principal, who in fact until this Monday was full-time in a classroom since we returned from Christmas. It's myself and it's the guidance counselor. So we have really utilized all the folks that we do have. We at one time at the elementary school had the strongest base of substitutes in the district, and that just no longer exists. A lot of our substitutes are wonderful, just were not comfortable coming in and not knowing where they would be each day and the different cohorts. Along with that, we had already pulled a fair amount of staff to create more classrooms, to reduce the class size, so that when we were in green, we could even stay 3 feet apart. BES does not have classrooms that meet even the minimum recommendation for space per the DOE guidelines, which is 900 square feet. Most of our rooms do not have that. And so we pulled the equivalent of 2 full-time interventionists, and that has remained for the whole year, to be classroom teachers. And that has added classrooms to 4th grade and 1st grade, which are our grade levels with the most students. We have over 110 students in each of those grade levels. So in 4th grade, that created 6 classrooms in the building. In 1st grade, that has 6 classrooms in the building and 1 fully remote classroom, our only truly fully remote classroom left since the start of the school year. In August, we had 100 children whose families had chosen for them to be remote. By Columbus Day weekend, we were at 48, and that required us to shift classrooms around and moved us fully into the integrated learning model, with the exception of 1st grade, where we still have a full remote classroom. And that's the model of classroom setup that we have been at since the Columbus Day weekend. That did allow for another 1 full-time equivalent of reading specialist and math specialist to go back to their duties as interventionists. So when we started school, we actually had 3 of those positions supporting classrooms. That has been good, as we've been able to see students, although not at our typical capacity. We also, at the start of the school year, when we first asked people about essential worker status, and I think we all can view August as somewhat of a distant memory of what we thought this school year would be like and how we'd be in and out, we had 60 students whose parents had requested essential worker status. As we came back from Christmas vacation, we were at 189. Like Owen, certainly understand the need for families for that essential worker status. We followed the guidelines from the New Hampshire DHHS of who those were. That is 12 pages of positions. And so our numbers were going up. And as we came back from Christmas, the request for that status increased. What happened for us is that put us into classrooms that were well over 60% in over half the school. There were classrooms that were sometimes out of 18 kids, 14 kids were in while we were in yellow. We made the hard decision for families that when we returned on after Martin Luther King Day, that we are simply in yellow, but we do not have the option for essential worker students. What that has done is our classrooms are at 50%. And so we are at the 6 feet at BES currently while we're in yellow. We have also been able to, we stay in our cohorts. And by that, I mean for the students, they stay in their rooms for all learning, unless there is intervention services. Some may leave, some do not. But that is approximately 50 students total in the school who may do that. And so we eat in our classrooms, and when the kids go out to recess, they play with just those kids in their class, which we now refer to as a cohort. So our playground is divvied up into 6 different rounds, and the kids move around so that they have a different part of the playground to see each week. I think that has done a lot to eliminate any spread children from children. So we have had very few children that if we have, when there's been a case that we've had to put out more than their class because they do not integrate with other kids. So recently, in the last 3 weeks, every time we've had a case that may have come from a child as opposed to a staff member, it has been that class with the members of that class and adults who may support that child who need to quarantine. So that has been a huge place for us. We would love to instructionally be in green. I can't say that enough. We met with our safety team yesterday within the BES school. Instructionally, green is better. It's better for kids. We get more done, and we look forward to the day we return to green. But right now, where we are in the cases, yellow seems to be the most, the safest manner for us to do that in. I believe that would sum it up. So for us right now, we are in yellow. We are at 6 feet apart. When we go to green, our children will be 3 feet apart. We have purchased desks that came in just a few weeks ago. And so that really helped our classes that were really struggled with having big tables that took up a lot of space. So we were able to purchase 60 desks, and we have put those in the grade levels where the class sizes are biggest. And I think that's all. Thank you all. Adam's turn.
Good evening, everybody. BMS, we are in yellow at this time. We've had a really robust conversation around going to green. The teachers have been incredibly thoughtful about it. I felt fortunate to be able to read the Back to School Bow emails. I know that there's so many of you out there in the audience tonight who were incredibly thoughtful about it, and I appreciate being able to read, where you're at, where your thinking is at. At BMS, our conversations kind of trickled through our safety committee primarily, because that was the vehicle through which we felt like we would best kind of coalesce our thinking and then share it with Dr. C, and he would be able to share it with the SAU board. The safety committee at BMS, we began our conversation with why it was important to go to green, why it was important to get kids back into the building. And all the teachers felt like it was really important to get the kids back in green when it was safe to do so. And as Dr. C kind of referred to earlier, that's the linchpin, that's the key, is when it's safe to do so. They cited the social emotional reasons for bringing kids back, the burden on families, which is massive. We can't overstate that. It's really hard if you're a parent with a 5th or a 6th grader, because they're not necessarily independent enough to be home alone. And that wasn't lost on any of our teachers at all in our conversation. A lot of concerns, a lot of trepidation came out in our conversation, concerns primarily around the key theme of spacing, as was alluded to in so many of the Back to School Bow emails. BMS, we will absolutely be at 3 feet in green. That's where we are. So I put that out there. It did work in the fall. It worked pretty well. We had built table dividers. We had creatively used our furniture differently. But our class sizes are big. In 7th and 8th grade in particular, we will have class sizes that are 22, at least 22 in some instances. Other sections are smaller, but we set each room for 22 in 7th and 8th grade. That's our base set when we're putting furniture in. So that will equal 3 feet. We took a hard look at lunches and how we would do those. That was a huge challenge in the fall. I think if we come back with community transmission being at the level it is right now, we are gonna move into the gym and take half the gym. That's gonna be important to do, just because that is the biggest room in the building. We'll still be able to leave half of the gym for Mr. Dow to use with his PE classes during those lunch blocks. But by doing that, we feel it's really important to have good, solid 6 feet anyway during lunch. And that will enable us, we believe, to do that. So that will be a accommodation we'll make, a change we'll make. It was good to hear Dr. C speak this evening, and also earlier today, the administrators had a meeting with Dr. C, and he pointed to the information he had learned from Dr. Noble about the droplets and how that spread and how masking is actually more important than spacing. During our safety committee meetings, we didn't have that information. So the distancing was it was a point of a lot of conversation, and we looked at the studies, which the governor's level change matrix alteration of a week or so ago pointed to. And we really felt like, gee, these studies were done on 6 feet. So how will that translate to an environment where it's 3 feet? But hearing Dr. Noble, who's a respected epidemiologist, say that the mask is more important, that might really help people to feel more comfortable. I'm not sure. I can't know that yet. Just looking at my notes for a quick minute. We will make accommodations if we go to green. The kids are already really pretty darn good about wearing masks. That's not to say they're perfect, but they need reminders. Our teachers do remind, but they've been pretty good about it. I think on the teacher end of things, we can do things maybe with better quality masks for them to help them feel safer. So I want you to know, as a community, we're going to think about creative ways to try to double down on PPE and make things as safe as we possibly can. Concerns that I have are, I think right now in yellow, we've had the benefit of a number of cases, COVID positive cases, have missed our student body based on timing. It just, for example, student in the L through Z cohort tests positive, but the positive test comes in on a Wednesday. They haven't been in school for 4 or 5 days. So there's no contact tracing. That would be what I would call a miss. We had a COVID positive case, but it missed impacting our student body. As we move into green, misses don't often happen. Like, it would be very unlikely for a miss to occur, which means you'll be doing more contact tracing, which leads to more quarantining. So that's just something to be aware of. And I've been referring to that in our conversations internally as it could end up being an inconsistent green as opposed to a more consistent yellow. And that's not to say that yellow was absolutely consistent either, particularly in 7th and 8th grade. 7th in particular was really hard hit for us. And I'll talk about that in a minute, just so people kind of have a context of why that happens. In 5th and 6th grade, we're set up differently, and it's really, it takes almost like a perfect storm to have to quarantine the entire grade, and it can happen. But we've had to quarantine exceptionally little in 5th and 6th grade. I'm not sure that 6th grade has been quarantined yet this year. And that's because they're kind of almost micro-teamed. So they really only have 2 teachers. The events that would have to come together to put out all 3 teams in 5th or 6th grade is pretty significant. 7th and 8th is more vulnerable, and it's something for people to think about as you think about going green, because your typical student in 7th or 8th grade has 5 core classes. That means they're going to travel through 5 classes in a day, sort of like what they would have to do at the high school. Actually, we have switched that a bit for this year, where we are blocked. So they have 5 classes, but they only go to 3 on any given day, and it alternates A day, B day. But my point is, there's a lot more exposure and a lot more potential contacts. So that's why it's become a little bit more difficult with quarantining in 7th and 8th grade. So my point there was just about the consistency. I think that could be a little bit of a challenge. I do think we have a really good plan. I really do. I'm really proud of the work this SAU did on the plan. I'm proud of the collaboration between the teachers, the administration, and the school board. I think it's a great plan. There are several pieces that were put in there that really are excellent and somewhat difficult to optimize. Like, for instance, we had a second custodian part-time to start the year, but that's been really difficult to hire. So we're going to have to think about that as a building. I look at that as a challenge. Like, how can we help our main custodian, Dave, to ease some of that sanitizing burden during the day, just because we're simply not able to hire the second part-time custodian. But I think we can, I think, again, it's a challenge. Challenge have solutions. If we work together, if we're smart about it, that's something maybe we can try, we can affect a solution of some sort. There were definitely concerns out of the safety committee. Our safety committee was hoping to be able to push the decision day for going to green out until 2 weeks after February vacation. And the reason I share that is they had a logic to it. Like, what their logic was it seemed to make sense to them that we've had a bump after each of the last 2 vacations and holidays with travel and gatherings. You then have that quarantine period built in. So, that was part of the conversation they had. They recognized, they really did, the teachers, the support staff, they recognized green is something that's coming. It's when. So there wasn't a denial of, gee, we can't go to green, we're not going to go to green. It was simply when and how. and they felt that by getting into March with warmer temperatures, increased ventilation, and that conversation sort of spawned out of what was working in green in fall, because we felt like we had some success in green. It was awesome to have the kids in, absolutely awesome. But the teachers had their windows open. Teachers could bring the kids outside. Some classes actually were held outside. So it just felt like by doing that, it got us closer to those days where windows open, increased ventilation, and that sort of thing. So I've gone on for quite a while, and I think I've hit the big key points I needed to hit. And just thank you all for participating in this really robust conversation, because I do think it is a community conversation. So Brian, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm in the room, so I'm going to be kind of up front here. So I'm just going to kind of give you an idea of where we're at, at BHS, give you some data. I'm an old math teacher, so I like data. So, we put a little survey out to the staff and to the students about kind of comfort level, about, shifting the green, being currently in yellow, so on and so forth. When we put it out to our staff, we had about 37% who would feel comfortable going to green, like hypothetically tomorrow, right away. 52% who are comfortable in yellow but would be anxious about making that kind of change, and the remaining percent who are just anxious already kind of in yellow. That was kind of expected. The student one was very interesting. I mean, the luxury we have being in high school is our kids give us great input and great feedback when we ask them to. So I sent something out to the kids, and what I got back for data was about 57% would feel comfortable shifting to green, like right now. Actually was a little surprised. I thought that'd be higher, but 57% would feel comfortable shifting right now. 36% feel very comfortable in yellow, but would be anxious about shifting to green right now. And the remaining are already kind of anxious in yellow. So that's just some interesting data from our staff and students. Based upon kind of I'm sure everyone is if you're a high school parent, you must be really annoyed by my learning status surveys that I request all the time, but it's very appreciative. There's a huge difference sometimes between the 15th and say the 16th kid in a classroom, how we can space desks, how we can social distance, everything that comes along with that. So that is extremely valuable information for us. This latest one, we got about 75% of parents to respond. If we're going to make a shift to green, we need to know every single kid what their learning status is, if they're coming in the building, if they're not coming in the building. So that's work we got to hunt down. We still have 25% of our student population we haven't heard from this most recent survey. That's work we got to do. Projecting that data out, we'd have about 82% of our kids in the building in green. 71% are in yellow in some capacity, whether it's here 2 days a week or the 4 days a week. 21% of our students right now are what we consider priority students, which are here the full week. And what that approximates out to currently, in our cohort 1 days, we have about 47% of the student population in the building. And on the cohort 2 days, 45%, 46% present here in the building. It sure feels like cohort 2 group has more, but that's what the numbers say. So we'll kind of go with it, which makes sense. We're in yellow. We should have about half the population. We have about half the population of kids kind of in the school. The irony of all this, when I hear the other schools talk, is we probably are the best equipped at handling more kids, and yet we probably have the lowest, percentage of kids trying to attend school every single day. We've been really fortunate, especially unlike the elementary schools, where we've been able to accommodate any request that has come our way for a student to be in priority status. Anyone who's asked, we've been able to say yes, and we've been able to keep our social distancing. Our attendance has gone up every single week since vacation. We have more and more kids in the building every single week. We've been starting a slow march kind of towards green naturally with all these kind of requests, which is really positive. And I think we would continue to kind of go in that shape. I got a request today about coming in to be a priority student, able to say yes to, which was great. So we continue to do that. We're also best equipped from a staffing standpoint. The moving of periods and the way that teacher schedules break out, we can use subs across multiple class periods, use our paras creatively, use our administrative team creatively, and we're able to do a pretty good job from a staffing standpoint. And I think the big thing for us at the high school is we've been able to be consistent. It feels like a long time ago, but it was only October we were kind of in the green there, had a big case that we had to quarantine, and then shifted to yellow, and we've pretty much been in yellow ever since. We've been able to maintain that consistency, and we've been really fortunate in that sense. I think that's helped us kind of navigate some of the struggles that are going on, is that consistency. That's just an advantage we have up here at the high school. I don't think the benefits of green can be debated. Like, green is where we need to get to. You know, I think just the timing is important. I'm concerned, you know, we talk about this with our counseling and our support people all the time. I'm concerned about the scale being kind of tipped about social emotional health of our students versus their physical safety. Obviously, physical safety is a priority. I don't want to minimize that, but we are seeing kind of more and more behaviors amp up, especially, you know, over the past 3 or 4 weeks. Part of that is we have more kids in the building, so that's a good problem to have on one hand. But the other thing is some of the behaviors I fear, especially with some of our younger students, is there's just kind of a stunted maturity of what's kind of going on. Is the best way to describe it. They don't have as many role models, positive role models, just from juniors and seniors who are in the building, and I think that hurts a little bit. They're not seeing that type of positive high school behavior kind of being modeled, and I think we're kind of seeing some behaviors we typically wouldn't see out of younger kids in January of a school year at this point, February of a school year. You know, our academics, I think we're holding strong. I talked to other principals at other high schools, and you know, on one hand, I feel great. Everyone wants to know what we're doing to kind of keep things going, because the word out there is good, but it's not good enough. You know, when we compare to other years, we are not as succeeding as much as we are across the board as we typically would. So that is kind of an area that kind of concerns me. Thinking about shifting the green, there's you know, interesting in the kids surveys, one thing that kept coming out, and I agree with this, is they talked about it'd be great if we could get back outside for lunch, and it'll be really great. I'll feel much better when we can get outside again for lunch. That was a recurring kind of thought in kids surveys. We had the luxury in the fall of being able to spread way out for lunchtime outside. Lunch is our most vulnerable spot when it comes to kind of distancing and everything like that, masks and everything like that. Even right now, the cap is getting tighter by the day. You know, the gym is getting tighter by the day. If you came in today, you can see we're expanding tables and desks and benches all over the place in the hallways and everywhere to space kids out during lunch. So when we do that shift to green, that's got to be kind of a component. If we do that and we can't get outside, we got to figure out a plan. We have ideas. We'll figure it out. I don't doubt that. But that's going to be kind of part of the work. Obviously, the warmer the weather does, as soon as we can get outside, we're going to push kids outside, and that will help with that quite a bit. The quarantining is, I don't want to say concern, because you quarantine because you need to quarantine, but that will be a factor in kind of all of this when we shift to green. The first time we had a case in green, a student case, we had to do 60 quarantines off of that one case, and this is the disadvantage of the high school schedule. A kid could be in 4 different classes over the course of a day. Could be in lunchtime, passing times, everything that comes along with that. There's a lot of quarantine that could come to that. Since that case, we've actually had 27 student cases up here in the high school, and you probably haven't heard much about them because we haven't had to do much contact tracing, because the kids are all more than 6 feet apart. We've been able to spread kids out for lunchtime. Kids have just been at home because it wasn't their cohort days or anything along those lines. And our quarantining has been significantly decreased in that time point. That's not a reason not to go back to green. It's just a reality of being in green at the high school. There's going to be more quarantining and more contact tracing. That's going to be a component of that. And that just has to be kind of mentioned as we kind of make this decision. We got work to do whenever we ever kind of settle on that time. We got to rearrange classrooms again. We physically moved desks out of classroom and chairs and everything like that. That just takes some time to get back in the classroom. It's just labor. It's okay. Like I said, the lunch, we're going to have to kind of wrap around, figure out some adjustments to that whenever the time comes. We've had, obviously, we got to revisit everything with our staff. Staff's lives have changed since August. You know, some have been some very positive changes and some not so much. So we're going to have to make some adjustments, some accommodations for people because of that. Some of them are good. We do have staff who are starting to get shots and starting to be vaccinated, and that will be helpful, or so they can start coming back into the building, some people who are remote. Likewise, we've had some life situations that are going to force some staff to make if we were in green to talk about how we're going to handle those things. So that's just work we got to get done. It's not a reason not to go to green, just the reality of going to green, what it will take. We're going to continue to need help from the community. That's going to be crucial. I know it's the reality of high school, and we want this ultimately for the kids to become more independent and less reliant on their parents to oversee what they're doing. We're transitioning to college where they'll be truly independent. But we need help from parents. We need those health screening forms completed every morning, like being on top of that. I need responses to surveys when I send them out, and so we know who's in the different classes. We need people to be honest to us when they're traveling and if they have to quarantine or whatever the case may be. We've heard through the grapevine people who have traveled and not told us and then show up at school, and that can be tough, and awkward. I'm not saying that's a widespread thing. Please don't think that, but like, this has got to be a team effort if we're going to do this, and we just need everyone's help kind of doing that. I'm looking forward to kind of the rest of the year. I mean, the days blur together. Maybe this may have been last week, but we sat and we kind of planned out the events for the rest of the year, especially the senior related ones, and includes prom and senior cruise and the award nights and graduation and everything like that. And we're kind of operating as we're going to be in person for those type of events. I mean, we'll have contingency plans in place for all that stuff. Don't get me wrong. But in May and June, we are hoping to have all that stuff in person. I think that's going to be important. So we see the value of green and the importance of getting there. I think the timing is just going to be kind of crucial in that type of place so we can do it successfully. I'll leave you a couple of dates high school wise that are in our world. Winter athletics will be all wrapped up by March 12th. That's the last finals date for any of our teams. We probably may have a couple teams playing that week in the semis and finals, hopefully. So that is kind of an important date that week for us in terms of wrapping up winter athletics. Our SAT day is March 3rd. When we get back from vacation, that's when the juniors take the state SATs, the state testing day. There is a backup date for that. It's the 24th. We already have 12 juniors who are out, have to do the backup date already that we know of because of traveling restrictions. They're leaving over February break, and we'll need to quarantine coming back. My fear is that we would have to quarantine a lot of juniors and then really kind of have that date get kind of messed up for us. It's a fear all high schools. It's not unique to us. But that's coming up March 3rd. The more we push a little bit into March and April, the more we're going to have concrete dates of vaccines, which I think will help a lot of people. I talk to staff, and they're optimistic when they hear their peers getting the vaccines and getting their first shots and everything like that. And the more that we have that positive kind of energy come out, I think that helps the staff morale when it comes to it. I'm hoping, as time goes, we get more and more people in. We kind of hear every single day someone else getting it, and that's good. We got vacations coming up February. I know people are going to travel and they're going to need a break. Everyone's burned out from all of this. I know that. And, this has been really challenging. And I just want to make sure when we do this, it sticks. I think that's what's important with all this. I'm ready to go to green. I think, I drive the counselors nuts, the school counselors. I think they're counseling me as much as anyone else right now. So I want to kind of get us back to normal and get us rolling, and the positive energy of having people around and everything. I just don't want it to be a start and stop. And I think it's important. It's not easy, and I think it's just important, that we kind of make that positive progress. And I think we're doing that at the high school and continue to do so. So that's all I got. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Bryce Larrabee, a lot of people on the web here, 2 people in the audience. It's such an odd format to talk. So anyway, I'm here to talk about the comments that we received. I did a similar thing back when we met in, I think it was August, and summarize the comments at that time, and I'll basically do something very high level. And I can tell that we have 134 people watching on the screen, and we received 78 comments, and each name it scrolls by on the screen right now, and I think all 78 are part of the 135. I recognize virtually every name, so it's kind of the same audience as submitted the comments. And I can commit to you folks that the whole board read every single email that we received, and certainly appreciate all those. As a really high overview, we didn't get any that we would consider anti-mask. We didn't get a single email that said, we shouldn't have masks in school and people should respond. We got a couple of those this summer, but we didn't this time. And then we got 2 that I would say were quite hostile towards the school board and what we're doing here and the things that are that we're trying to accomplish. But the other ones, which are 76 others, were extremely complimentary of everything we've done. Everything started with,
very positive emails and led to positive emails and didn't necessarily on the same page, but they were all nothing but supportive, and that's always nice to hear. And so out of the 78 that we received, 44 of them were from folks that are not tied to the school district, and so not teachers or nurses within the school district. And of those 44, 27 wanted to go green right away, and the other 17 did not want to go green now and thought we should stay in yellow. And it was unclear, but I think a lot of those also seem to be coming from folks that are in the education world, just don't teach in Bow, like might teach in some other community. But I don't know if you guys agree, but it felt like a lot of them had an educational background, just not necessarily in Bow. We also received 27 from staff, teachers, nurses, paras, people that work in the Bow school system, some of which don't live in Bow but teach here. And of those 27 we received, one was interested in going green now, and the other 26, so 26 out of the 27 did not want to go green at this time. We also received 2 emails that said whatever we decide is good with them. And finally, we had 5 of them that said essentially just questions. They didn't necessarily take a stance on any of it. I think that's it. That's really the summary. Thanks.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? 1 second. One last thing. I did want to put it in a frame of reference, which is we have roughly 1,000 families with students in the Bow school district, roughly 2,000 students. You assume 2 kids per family. So with 78 responses, probably under 8% of families chimed in. And then I always think of the staff between all the schools, about 400 staff. And so 28 emails out of 400 is about, what's that, 5 or 6%. Thanks. Sorry, good.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad you did that. Thanks, Bryce. That was a helpful way to parse out the data. I put a chat out to anyone on the phone or the computer. If you would like to comment live now, please send me a chat and unmute.
Raise their hand.
Or raise your hand.
You get the little raise the hand.
And if anyone so desires, we will listen to that comment. If not, we will proceed with the agenda and move into Dr. Cascadden's recommendation with board discussion from there. So I'll give it a minute. While anyone's thinking about it, I do want to thank the heads of the buildings. Those were great summaries. A lot of information for all of us to consider. Okay, we have one live.
Yeah. Hi, how you doing? This is Peter Dykstra. Can you guys all hear me?
Oh, hold on, Peter, 1 second. Yep. I go to the back. Peter, we got one live, so I'll just hold on 1 second.
Okay, sure.
Hi, my name's Carrie Anderson, and I'm a parent of 2 students at Dunbarton Elementary School. I have a son who is in 1st grade and another son who is in 4th grade. And I was one of the very concerned parents who wrote to the board most recently last week about wanting to have my children come back to school green as soon as possible. Both my children have either an IEP or another plan because of their, disabilities. And that's something that hasn't been addressed. And I have to give props to Mr. Harrington, because he has allowed one of my children with severe problems to be in person and be considered essential because of his behaviors. However, my other son, who is in 4th grade, is in that classroom that has been a concern because it happens to be one of the largest classrooms in the building, I believe, number-wise with students. And it's also further complicated by their teacher being fully remote. So what I have seen from my son, and I'm getting very emotional because He is constantly frustrated with not being able to communicate during a meeting for math exam, for example. He is constantly talked over throughout the class, and it's very frustrating. And truthfully, today he had to have yet another assessment, and I had to help him 90% with that assessment because he did not know what he was doing. Yes, he scored well on the assessment, but that's because I had to help him. So he does not have basic math abilities that a fourth grader should have. It's sad. It's very, very sad. And I attribute that not just because we are in yellow. I attribute that also because we don't have an in-person full-time teacher in that classroom that can meet his needs when he is there 2 days a week and that has control over the classroom remotely. That is not happening. I have probably I sit next to him as he's in his classes, and he cannot ask a question because 10 students are talking at the same time. Sometimes it goes off topic about American Girls, American Girl dolls. Sometimes it's about, what did you have for lunch? I mean, there is zero control over it. So that's yet another complex situation that comes from being remote, okay? The other thing is I wanted to ask a question about the science. Dr. C had said that he's very science-driven, and I just want to know if there was any kind of studies that the board has looked at in order to compare the transmission from public schools or within the public schools by students with that of schools that are not public, so private schools. Because those private schools have been in person all along. They don't have to follow the same guidelines as the state. So I wonder if our transmission rates are the same. That's one of my questions. I also want to point out that my oldest son has also had to be quarantined because of an illness that, thank goodness, it wasn't COVID, but I do want to point out the quarantine times will not have to be that same length of time that students are out of school. The doctors are prioritizing the rapid tests for students so that they can return to school. So I knew by the end of that day that his test was negative and he did not, in fact, have COVID. So that's just yet another thing that the doctors are doing a great part to make sure that they have those rapid tests so our kids can be in school. And I think that's it right now.
Okay, Peter, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my name is Peter Dykstra. I've got two daughters right now at Bow Elementary School. One's a kindergartner and one is in second grade. My wife and I both work full time. So obviously we were one of the parents that tried to move our children to a 5-day-a-week schedule this semester. In the first semester and this fall semester, we kept them in the yellow status, and we didn't do 5-day because we knew how hard it was going to be on the school. So we decided we would try and see how it worked, and it did not work. So we had to try to go the 5-day-a-week this semester, and obviously this change has been very difficult for us. One thing I just want to highlight with regards to that is I hear a lot we're talking about the different schools and how this is working for each school, and I want to just really make one thing really importantly clear. Depending on the age of the student, this is a big difference in how they deal with remote learning, I've noticed. So a kindergartner, remote learning with a kindergartner is very different from older students and even first graders as well. But even my second grader, she's pretty self-sufficient. She can do her work on her own on the computer for the most part. And it's not perfect. It's not as good as being in school, but at least she can do it. And she doesn't need to have somebody constantly with her to get it done. With a kindergartner, that's not possible. And I'm sure this is true for most kindergartners, but my kindergartner, my daughter, she needs constant supervision and really to get through all of the work. So it makes it impossible to do work, our own work during the time that she's home. We've now had to take her to Bow Youth during the times that she's in yellow when she's not in school. But at the Bow Youth Center, they're doing the best they can, but they can't provide the kind of hands-on work with these kindergartners and first graders that they need. And so what ends up happening is they're just not learning. They're not getting the work done at all. There's completely not learning. And it's just, it's a nightmare. It's really awful. I mean, the kids that are this young, they're getting nothing out of this, out of remote learning, almost nothing. And so unless you're with them through every minute of it, which then makes it impossible if you have two full working parents. So I just want to reiterate how really I understand the concerns people have about, moving to green, and I do hear that. I just want to reiterate again, though, I think this is also really important. Dean Kaskin mentioned this, and one of the other principals did as well. The change to 3 feet from 6 feet that I know is a concern when moving to green is one of the things that comes up a lot. If everybody is masked, it doesn't make a big difference as long as you're wearing masks. It's a key thing to understand. It makes a difference if you don't have masks on, how close you are. If you're masked, it becomes much less of a concern. So I just want to make sure that's understood by everyone, if that's the major concern in going to green. But I just want to make that, just sort of say my piece then. And I thank you all very much for what you're doing. I can't imagine what teachers and administrators are going through with all this. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Anyone else? Just chime in. Someone else. Go ahead. If you had your hand raised. Go ahead, Chris.
Good evening. I'm Chris Ulrich. First, I want to thank all the administrators and parents who are watching today. Looks like you guys have done a tremendous amount of work, and especially Principal Kruger, who I appreciate sharing news that isn't necessarily popular but is true, isn't an easy thing to do. I appreciate the fact that you guys have been using a lot of data to drive your decision, and I wanted to just ask if the Bow School Board has considered another piece of data. This past weekend, Mr. Jeffrey Kaplan, who was a teacher at Bishop Brady High School, died of COVID-19 related complications. He was also the father of eight kids himself. We've emphasized that it's important to go green when it is safe. And so I want to ask the board and the administrators if this very recent development in the passing of a colleague in education has helped persuade or determine whether or not it would be appropriate for us to make that shift back to green. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else? Okay, Tracy.
We've got another one.
Tracy, we can't hear you.
Yeah, she's not muted either.
Tracy Soros?
No, it's Tracy Honberg. Yeah.
We can see her talking, but it's not. Tracy, if it makes you feel better, that happened to me before too on here, and I couldn't figure it out. I end up calling in on my phone is what I end up doing.
Check your mic too to make sure the volume's up on your mic. But why don't we take a comment here live and then we'll come back to you, Tracy. Go ahead, sir. Oh, yeah.
Am I there? Hi, my name is Jared. I have a son who is in 4th grade at Dunbarton Elementary School. And I want to, first of all, thank the school board and everybody who's doing everything they can to get us back into green. I don't think it can be overstated. I know there's been several people that have talked about it already, as about the impact this is having on our kids from an emotional well-being standpoint and from an educational standpoint. I know that this is something that I think needs to be really considered almost equally as much as COVID itself. I was wondering if the one thing that was kind of touched upon during the meeting so far was kind of staffing issues and the issues that they're going to have going to green. I'd like to know what those issues are and what's going to be done to resolve them once we go back to green.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Tracy, is your nothing?
I actually just muted her because of the feedback. I think if she tries unmuting herself.
Unmute yourself, Tracy, one more time and try.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey. I've had a lot of audio problems lately. Okay, so I sent in some comments, and I don't want to rehash all of that. And I just want to say, first of all, that you guys have done an amazing job this year, and I'm really very impressed. But I'm coming at it from the high school perspective because my one kid who's still in school is in high school. And so I'm thinking about it from the perspective of having an older kid who does obviously have a better ability to do what they're supposed to do on their own. And I don't have to watch her all the time and make sure that she's, following what's going on in school and all of that. And that's obviously much easier than being a parent of small children during this. And so that's different. And all the schools don't, to me, it seems like all the schools don't necessarily have to do the same thing at the same time. But obviously I'm not an administrator and don't have to make that call. But in considering the science behind all of this, what I haven't heard addressed in this discussion is that the timing where we are with the pandemic, I think we are coming out of a holiday spike, a horrible, horrible holiday spike. And we talked about, I think Adam brought up the February vacation, and one or two other people did as well. But the health experts are also predicting that we are going into a spike from the variants that are out there. You've got the British variant that is 70% more transmissible, and now they're thinking that it may also be more deadly. And when you put those factors together via math, which is not my specialty, it becomes significantly more dangerous than the virus as we've been dealing with it. And then the South African variant is out there, and they have a lot of questions about that. And there's also the Brazilian variant. And there are a lot of open questions. And the time that I heard from a health expert just yesterday was they expect that spike to show up in 6 to 14 weeks. And so we are actually going into another dangerous period. And I feel like we're sort of saying, whew, the holiday spike is over, things are better now. And we might be able to look at it that way if we had a good percentage of people who were vaccinated, but we don't. And while I understand there's light at the end of the tunnel, and while I understand that the governor very much wants schools open, there was a way to address that. Teachers and administrators could have been prioritized for vaccinations, but they were not, and they are not. And so while it's a nice wish, there was no action put behind those words. And when if kids go to high school and we're in green status, there will be more cases. And when those sick kids go home, it's not just them who have to stay home, it's their families that have to quarantine. And the effects ripple throughout the community. I'm as sick of this pandemic as anyone. I work from home, and I feel like I go days at a time without ever leaving the house. And my daughter is 15, and she is as sick of her parents as any 15-year-old would ever be. And she doesn't want to stay home, but we have to do what's right in terms of what's good for the health of the kids, what's good for the health of the community, and say, okay, we just have to be patient a little while longer. You know, we all, to use the language of the kids, it sucks. It really sucks. But we have to say, all right, we're not quite where we want to be yet.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. No. Let me cover some typical ground rules that we have on the SAU board. Generally, we will accept public comment, and we will listen and consider, and we will spend a great deal of time looking through the information that we receive from everyone. We don't let any comment go by. You know, Bryce said we read every email. We did, and there were a lot of long emails. So we take everything into consideration. I wrote down the 7 topics that have come up between the 2 live comments and the 2 or 3 online. But getting in a back and forth is something, you know, we don't do. It can happen at town meeting, it can happen at the school district meeting, but during the school board meetings, we typically don't. We just take it all in. And when we have a discussion next, after Dr. C comes up, we will cover some of these areas. But just to recap, some of the questions, you know, one was staffing. I think that one can be answered pretty easily. When staff have to quarantine, it means they're out of the building. So sometimes we lose a lot of staff to quarantining. I took down a note around 4th grade and DES. I took down private school versus public. I have not seen that data. I don't know if anyone else on the board has reviewed it. I do know their rules are different. A lot of them in private schools stay on campus the whole semester. They do not leave. Those are the boarding schools. But if anyone else has information, we can discuss that during our discussion. Small children need more support. You know, I think everyone's in agreement with that. You know, as we sit here, I just looked around. All of us have kids in the district. All of us are going through the same thing. So we hear you loud and clear. We know personally what's going on. You know, some of us have middle or older kids. Some of us have younger kids. So we have the whole spectrum. So we'll cover some of that stuff. The timing of the pandemic, the variants, that's really tough to get into. You know, we really don't know a lot of things about these variants. The timing of vaccine, you know, that's a big political issue that we're not gonna grapple with. That's not in our control. We can't control that. All we can control is the health and safety the best we can of the students, the community, the staff, and the community. You know, that's our focus here with the outside guidelines that we get. But you should know, everyone listening, that we do have medical professionals on the board. We do have medical professionals that we consult with, and we take everything together and consider it very carefully. And we'll talk about some of this.
Club said you have one more hand.
One more hand?
You have 3 people with hands.
Okay. I just need a name. She went already. Roxana, you're up.
Hi, thank you. So just to I was reading one of the comments in the chat, but I think just for just my comment is, you know, I hear that, you know, we're very focused on safety and COVID, which I 100% can understand, but the other things that are happening to children when they're out of school, you know, I'm sure everyone is well aware, but I'd like that to also be weighed in against the risk of COVID, is the risk of some of these other things that children might experience when they're not in the school setting. Just to echo something that Peter had said, you know, my daughter's in 4th grade. She's very self-sufficient, but it feels like she's going through the motions and primarily doing checkbox work. She has a fabulous teacher, you know, and that's nothing, you know, against the staff. I mean, they're doing a wonderful job. She enjoys being in school. She loves her teacher. She loves her class, but there are days where she doesn't have, you know, as many live meets. And it just, to me, I watch her just go through the notions of checking a box. So, you know, just to kind of think about at what point are we going to be ready? It seems like, you know, we can come up with 100 different reasons as why we're not ready to go back into green. But, you know, at some point the time has to come. You know, how much longer can we all endure this as parents, as children? You know, I don't know how much longer we can go through, another year, another 6 months. It's just really difficult. I mean, you know, we worked really hard this past year. My husband and I are both essential workers, first responder and a nurse. It's not easy for us to, you know, change things around, and it's not easy for us to see our daughter missing out on a lot of things that she enjoyed. I think that's the saddest thing of all, is that she enjoyed school so much. And, you know, I don't know what that's going to mean for her in the future, if she's not going to enjoy school as much when she goes back, but I hope she does. So I just would like you to consider at some point, you know, when is enough enough? When are we ready to go back? When can we start doing some things? When can we consider other issues that children might have being out of school for such a long period of time? 2 days a week is great, but it's definitely doesn't compare to 5.
Okay, thanks, Roxanna. Bill? Bill, you're next if you unmute.
Hey, Jared, thanks. Hey, Jared, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Bill.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so I just want to reiterate some of the things that I've heard. Yeah, I think we have 2 children, fifth and fourth grade at Dunbarton Elementary, and I apologize, 5th and 6th. And I do think that upon return to green, a 3-foot distance is reasonable, because you can't achieve that in most public spaces. So I think a 3-foot mast plan is perfectly reasonable. And reiterating the fact that working parents trying to go through this, I know we're all kind of in that same scenario. It's a virtual impossibility for a working parent who's working remotely to effectively complete their tasks at the same time needing to attend to our children that are learning remotely, where what I'm finding is the kids are constantly needing, essentially a tutor to help kind of guide them through some of those lessons, regardless of what grade they're in. And I think especially in the hybrid and yellow days, I find it seems like it's difficult for teachers to kind of split attention between in-class students and remote students in a real effective manner. And then sometimes the level of work assigned sometimes seems a little excessive, and sometimes turns into what feels like a little bit more busy work, which being able to get the kids through it and understanding might be unattainable for some of these kids. So if there's a possibility to reel back on some of the workload, or at least have another look at that, I think it would be beneficial to the kids. But otherwise, I'm hearing a lot of other comments that I agree with, so I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Great, thanks, Bill. Jen, any more? Okay, I think that's all of them, so I'll have Dr. Cascadden come back up, and then we'll head into a discussion. Okay. Great. Okay, Susan, we received your chat as well as Ted's chat. We will review both of those. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to probably respond to a couple things in the comments, as well as just tell you what the recommendation is. The first thing is, it's a saying that my fellow superintendents and I, the struggle is real. I mean, there's a lot of drama around us. I don't know, I don't watch The Bachelor, but my kids do. And, there's a lot of made up drama that you can get into on Facebook and so forth. But this COVID, the struggle is real. I mean, it's real, it's hard. People are tired. It's just tough. And the only other thing I'll say before I give my recommendation is a proverb from Solomon, and it says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life." And my recommendation is that we do accept the guidance of the governor or the guidance of DHHS. That's not a change in the plan, but we're going to accept the guidance. But we're going to stay status quo in our present operational level until March 15th. So we're going to stay exactly where we are, but on March 15th, the default of operation will turn to green, and we'll plan on implementing green starting on March 15th. I'll work with the guidance committee on any new information, whether that be variants, spiking cases, or so forth, and I'll work with the principals on the ability to staff. And I'll just talk about a couple things that are going on. Subs and staffing. We are down on subs, and I talked to the principals. Both elementary schools have been the most difficult ones to sub, and the schools have done well, and they've come on the thin edge a couple times. The other thing are lunch and buses. I mean, as an administrator, all your principals know those are your two big issues. Lunch is our big issue because kids have to take their mask off to eat. We got to get them 6 feet apart because the masks are going to be off. When we get to March 15th, winter sports will be done. Indoor sports will be done. We'll be able to take over the gyms. We'll be able to keep the gyms set up and not have to break them down, and we'll be able to deal with that lunch a little bit better. Weather will be better. At March 15th, we'll be able to get the kids outside more. February vacation is a huge issue. I think all 4 of our nurses weighed in on this. I take their input very seriously. They've been the frontline workers for us. They're very concerned about February vacation. I don't know if you know it, parents, but your elementary school kids have no filters. They've been coming to school and talking about all the fun and the travel that's planned for February vacation. And that's great, but you know, we're going to have to deal with staffing and getting settled after the February vacation. I think Adam captured it really good for me. In our plan, in order to be as open as possible, we've had inconsistency and quick pivots. And I learned something this week when I tried to be creative and change a snow day into a remote day, and then move the KIT cohort into the Wednesday. And about 4 or 5 people emailed me and said, that is tough. The inconsistency is tough. So, you know, Adam put it to me, would you rather have a consistent yellow or an inconsistent green? And I think at this point, I'm really saying a consistent yellow until March 15th will probably be our best way to go. And then on March 15th, we will look at being in green. Like I said, you know, it's not a change to the plan. We're accepting the guidance, but I just think as far as operations go, March 15th will be a date to look for. Like in anything in this plan, it will depend on if there are changes in what happens. Vaccinations will be further along. We'll see what the variants are doing. And if we can staff it, that's my recommendation to the board.
Roy, if we turn this, can they be heard?
We'll find out.
What's that?
We'll find out.
Okay, all right. So I think what I'm going to do for the folks on the computer, we are going to turn the camera. How's that look, Roy? Okay, so this is the board. Hopefully everyone can hear us. I'll stand next to the mic. Okay, I did not envision, neither did the executive committee we spoke today, having a formal vote at tonight's meeting because we are not going off in any different direction than we've been in all along. We've received the updated guidance. Dr. Cascadden has been granted the authority since the get-go to decide level changes with the executive committee's consideration. So, you know, we don't really need a formal vote. What I'd like to do is open it up to the SAU board, hear any general discussion we might want to have, any reactions to the comments, anything that you would like to say right now that you haven't so far.
I would just like to say, I think this probably has been the toughest decision to have to make, more so than when we started this way back in March. Because I don't think when we made this decision in March, we would be thinking that we'd still be dealing with this almost a year later. The impact that it's having on families is something that we can't even put into words, and we understand how difficult it is. I'm very fortunate that my youngest is a freshman in high school, but even getting him to do his work sometime has been a challenge. So I can't even imagine having younger kids at school, having children who need more assistance, how difficult that must be. I've read through all the emails, as have all the people on the board, and I do feel the best decision is to wait till March 15th. I know that seems like it's eons away, but I think it gets us through that hump over the winter and also through the vacation where we know people will be traveling. And I think it's really the best decision that we can make at this point, even though I understand how that's still going to impact so many families.
And Jeff Moody, Dunbarton Elementary School Board. I agree with Jennifer on the date of the 15th. I do think there are certain classroom situations that we need to look into much more closely to make sure that students are getting the support they need. And I promise from my side, from Dunbarton, that we will do that.
Bryce Larrabee, Bow Board. I think really the toughest thing of having an elected position is how often I find myself not doing something that I want personally, but having to do something that's for the better good of the community or things like that. And this is it. I feel like if it were me, the citizen, me, the person, the parent, I want my kids to read right away. My family is struggling. I mean, it is. And I echo exactly, I mean, it's the social, economic, not economic, socio-emotional issues that are just, it's unbelievable. I mean, I as the parent, I mean, I need it now. I mean, we're struggling. But as a school board member, I think I have to support what everybody's saying. The staff particularly doesn't seem comfortable coming in at this point. And, you know, there's a lot of good data points of why we need to push it out farther. But I hate it, situations like this. I find particularly in the budget things where I'm constantly voting against things that benefit my own kids and my family, but it's for the greater good, I guess. And this is one of those instances where I feel I'm supporting the March 15th date as well, but grudgingly, I guess.
Yeah, this is Martin Ossett, also Bow School Board. It's interesting. So my family is struggling too. I'm a parent of a second grader and a kindergartner. And just like Peter said earlier, remote learning with a kindergartner just doesn't work. You just can't make up what is happening in the classroom. And I give all credit to the teachers. Her teacher is phenomenal. She's trying to captivate the kids as much as possible, but it's just not the same thing. So as a parent, I absolutely want my kids to be in school full time, 100%. But I'm also the parent of a second grader who's been exposed to COVID in the classroom last Friday, and thus we have to quarantine for 10 days now. And I have also realized, coming back to the theme of science, that there's nothing special about my daughter's classroom. What happened in my daughter's classroom can happen in every classroom, full stop. And we've done a great job managing this pandemic so far up until this point. And I just don't want to screw it up. And on the home stretch, basically, I think we can get to green. Let's give it 4 or 5 more weeks. March 15 is a great date. Let's get people, if they want to travel, quarantine after you come back, and then let's work on a safe green for everybody. That would be my recommendation.
Clem, are you still on?
Jared, Jared, I'll chime in. I also echo all of those sentiments that everyone's brought up previously. I appreciate all the comments that the public has made. This is a extremely difficult challenge we're all facing, but as Bryce said, the greater good. is a consideration. And the other part of the equation, you know, we have our parents and our students, but we can't have school without our staff. And if we can't staff our schools, we can't have school. I know Owen Harrington was teaching first grade yesterday, which is a big challenge for Owen. And it's a, you know, a little pat on the back, but it's certainly something that we don't want to have happening constantly. So I support Dr. Cascaden's recommendation. I think it's a prudent plan. It's something that will get us to where we need to be eventually, which is where everyone wants to be, which is green and have our kids in school. I appreciate all the work that went into this, and I appreciate all the public comments.
Yeah, this is Jenna on Bow Board. I just kind of echo everything everybody said. I did appreciate all of the comments, and some of them, the thoughtfulness that went into them. I agree with the recommendation to wait till March 15th. For me, I'm struggling too. My husband and I both work outside the home, so we have 2 middle schoolers who have had to grow up faster and do their learning on their own. And it's been hard. I can't wait for them to go back to green. They want to go back to green. But for me, one of the big things is, because I work in the medical profession, we're seeing a lot of positive COVIDs every day. It peaked, it seems, in New Hampshire, and the cases are coming down. But they're still high, but they're coming down, which is good. I think that if we go to green, we're going to have a lot of cases, and it's going to result in a lot of quarantine, and we're going to have a lot of inconsistency of green to red to green to red. And I think I know for my family, but I think for a lot of families, that's in a lot of ways harder. I think kids need to be back in school, but I think it needs to be something that can be sustainable. I also think that while the vaccine didn't get rolled out for teachers right now, unfortunately, anybody that's high risk of getting really sick from COVID is qualifying for the vaccine, so we can wait till March 15th. Hopefully those teachers that are highest risk getting very sick from COVID will be protected, and I think that's important. We have to protect our staff because it is in the community still. So I think as much as I want everyone to go back to school tomorrow for my sanity, for the town's sanity, I think March 15th is the right decision.
Eric Goldman here. Board, I'll chime in too, but I don't have anything more to add. I don't think I agree with what everyone said. I'm a parent of a 5th grader. He's eager to get back there with green to see his buddies he hasn't been seeing regularly, and I'm eager to get him back there. But I think the prudent thing is to find that good middle ground. All those comments that came in, they were all read and all heard and appreciated. The numbers should be coming down. We don't know exactly what the variants are going to do. We were in green before in the fall, and we can do it well again soon. Even though we won't all be vaccinated necessarily as soon as we wish, the numbers of people who are vaccinated is steadily increasing, and that will make it safer and safer, and it will be good as the weather gets better, that we get more outdoor time. I fully agree with the current recommendation. I think March 15th sounds like a good plan.
Jeff, Nicole?
Okay, so I'm Nicole Sloan. I'm on the Dunbarton School Board, and I have younger kids. My first grader cries at least once a day when he's remote, probably more. It's been very, very difficult, but like Jennifer said, this has been way harder this time around than it was even in the summer, I feel, because emotions are so high. And I think in Dunbarton, we have some cases we really need to look at and try to quickly remedy. But March 15th really makes the most sense. And I wish it was February 8th, like I think all were hoping, but it just doesn't seem like it's the prudent thing to do right now. So I think I'll stick with that. That's the whole board.
Jeff Trexler. I support the recommendation. I don't think we're there yet to get into green. I can sympathize deeply with our parents who are struggling with their kids, but I can also understand that if we do go into green, we are more likely to be jumping back and forth and having to quarantine for extended periods and have a very inconsistent green. I think let's take the temperature again as we get into March, see where we're at. I think everybody ought to recognize that this is a plan, and plans should be amended as conditions change. So let's watch the conditions and see what happens, and take it up again when we get into March.
Good. Great. Yeah, no, I'll say echo everyone's thoughts. Very difficult decision. I've got a ninth grader and a sixth grader, and I'm fortunate enough I can work from home, but my wife is in the throes of it every day, all day, and it's exhausting. And I implore everyone that's not working at home to really look at the people that are giving it all, and the teachers and staff are in here every day, doing the best they can. The administration is doing a great job. Really thankful to be a part of a community that's really open-minded and focused on the school, focused on the students. The comments overwhelmingly positive. I was just very pleased to see all that. And I think we've got a really good plan in place. I just don't want to go red, green, or go back and forth with yellow. If we can avoid that and be more consistent. One observation tonight. I think Brian made a comment that really resonated with me. He said, in the fall, we had one COVID positive test in a junior, senior, I'm not sure what he said, and it ended up in 60 people in quarantine. That's just what's going to happen if we go green. And at the middle school and elementary schools, when there's more kids, in closer groups or smaller cohorts, I guess you could have fewer in quarantine, but that's a big number when you got 60 out. In Dunbarton, we got hit really hard with staff that contracted COVID, and it's tough, and it's very difficult to staff a school in those situations. So try and do the best we can, and hopefully everyone that listened in tonight and submitted comments see that we're paying attention to everybody's concerns and considerations and just trying to balance it out. That's all I have. If anyone else has anything else. Dr. Kapkan, do you have anything else to say? Okay. So thank you, everyone. Continue to send in comments about individual situations. The administration will take care of them the best they can, and hopefully we'll get through this, and we'll be seeing everyone live at our meeting soon. Take care. The Tyler agenda.
I didn't take minutes.
I took down 7 notes. We recorded it. Yeah.
I can't hear the meeting. That's weird. Very strange. I could hear it before.
Yeah.
It should not be on there. That is weird.